All right, guys, welcome. We have the Blue Jays preview today, going through the AL East as we're doing all week. Got our guy Arden Zwelling, who covers the Toronto Blue Jays for Sportsnet, also the host of At the Letters. Arden, what's up, man? Welcome back to the show.
Hey, man. Good to be here. A lot has changed since I first came on this podcast to talk Blue Jays, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think at one point we did like maybe 3 spring training previews in one of the years, and you've come back each year, which has always been fun. Maybe this is the year we actually do get that beer together, when they're in New York at some point. So, we can actually get in the same room to drink that beer. So. That'd be good.
Perhaps during the postseason.
Perhaps during the postseason. Knocking on wood for certain things. But yeah, man, welcome aboard. Definitely want to get. I think let's just kick it off with spring training, man. Like, what's the vibe down in Florida? I know you've been down there for a while now, and what's the feeling with the team?
It's an optimistic camp, and I guess that all teams are optimistic right now. Nobody's lost
best shape
yet.
Of our lives.
Right? Yeah, everybody's feeling good after the offseason. Everybody's actually excited to be around baseball again. Nobody, fingers crossed, has gotten injured yet. Nobody's in a slump yet. So obviously there's optimism at all camps. But I mean, the Blue Jays, it really is a different level of optimism. I mean, this is like my 10th or 11th year now, I guess, around the team, and I haven't seen it quite like this. And that was through the 2015, 2016 years. That was through the 2013 year when they pulled off that huge trade with the Marlins for Jose Reyes and Josh Johnson, and they were preseason World Series favorites and obviously fell flat on their faces ultimately. But I haven't seen this level of optimism since for a number of reasons. When you look at this roster and the way it's built, some of the young talent that emerged last season, some of the veteran talent that's been added over the offseason, and then also they're working out at this brand new player development complex, this state-of-the-art $100 million facility, which is like beautiful and futuristic and space age. It's incredible. So there's a lot of arrows pointing up right now for this franchise.
Yeah, tell me about this. Tell me about the facilities. What's you said brand new? All this stuff. Tell us about it, because I know in the past I've been down to Dunedin and seen the old. I guess that's the old stadium. There's a new one now where the old stadium, there was a lot of brick. It definitely had an older feel. Mm-hmm. The stands were like old school benches. Like it was definitely an old school spring training stadium.
Yeah, so the ballpark itself, the stadium was renovated a few years ago, pre-pandemic. They got to use it, and it's definitely a much better experience for fans now. And it's the same sort of bones of the ballpark. They just updated a bunch of stuff, added a bunch of things that you see at typical spring training ballparks, right? The ability to sort of walk around the entire outfield and stand out there, bars in the outfield, things like that. New amenities, obviously new paint on everything, and improved the concourses and just made it look a lot more modern and a lot more fan friendly. But I think that the really big improvement for the Blue Jays, the thing the organization is most excited about, is about 10 minutes away from the ballpark in Dunedin, and that's the club's new player development complex, which this spring they are finally maximizing for the first time. The pandemic sort of delayed when they were able to fully open it and fully use it just because of restrictions on gatherings, and obviously not a lot of baseball being played in 2020. But that now the Blue Jays are utilizing this brand new $100 million facility, which has just every bell and whistle a player could want, every amenity they could want, tons of spaces for preparation, for recovery, for development. There's a pitching lab and a hitting lab with all the modern tech and the force plate technology and hit tracks and TrackMan and Edgertronic cameras and all of those things, and just brand new facilities for players. I mean, the Blue Jays had at that complex what was easily 30 of 30 among MLB clubs when it comes to a spring training facility. There's high schools in Florida that had nicer facilities than the Blue Jays. And now the Blue Jays believe they have the best spring training facility and the best player development facility in baseball. So it's really exciting for the club.
Yeah, that is cool. I think I was down there. I think I was in Dunedin at a game. It must have been the year right before the renovations, because you couldn't even walk I remember stopping in right field. There was like an elevator that went up and down to help people that couldn't go up the stairs, and they hadn't done the whole renovation yet. So that's exciting for the team, and yeah, going from 30th to what they think is number one is good. It also just speaks to what clubs are doing now, I think, to get ahead with the advanced analytics and make sure that they're up to speed with all the latest training and bells and whistles like you mentioned. So it's a serious commitment to a facility down there. So definitely see that.
It's a selling point for free agents.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's something that the Blue Jays have. They've had a drone go through and prepare one of those sizzle reel videos.
Those things are awesome.
Right. Yeah, no, it looks like really cool.
Yeah.
And they send that to free agents when they're courting like a Kevin Gausman or Yusei Kikuchi. Like they send that to them. They're like, here's what you're going to be around. So it's a selling point because obviously players want to have the best facilities and resources. And the Blue Jays also think it'll be a competitive advantage down the line as more and more young players filter through the organization and start using what's available to them. And then the tools, resources, just the better. Man, the weight room at the old facility was like, I mean, I don't know, there's LA Fitnesses that were like 15 times the size. Like the weight room, it was embarrassing how small it was and how the Blue Jays had to schedule and program really inefficiently weight training and conditioning and strength for their players. Like it was a competitive disadvantage at that time. And now the new weight room is like enormous and sprawling and has everything that you could ever want. The Blue Jays players just able to use it to their benefit so much more than they were in the past. So the Blue Jays really do think they're going to develop players better down the line as young players move through this facility.
Well, that's exciting. Talking about some off-season stuff, mentioned free agents. You guys had, I think it's an interesting offseason because when you look at the players that you guys lost, they were significant. I mean, clearly you lost Cy Young, Robbie Ray. You lost Simeon, who is a hell of a bat and a good veteran presence in there. The best one for Yankee fans is Randall Grichuk. He's gone forever. We'll never have to see him in a Blue Jays uniform again, hopefully. And he cannot destroy the New York Yankees because it seemed like that was the only team he showed up for. But he did show up every single time we played them, and he was a pain in the ass for a very long time. So he is one guy that I am like, goodbye, have fun, good luck. Hope you have all the success in the world, not in that uniform. But you did lose a good amount of people, but you did add some people. Obviously, the trade for Chapman, and as you mentioned before, Kevin Gausman, Kikuchi. So Greg Bird's on that list, right? Would love to hear about what's the vibe check on Greg Bird. But yeah, talk about the offseason because it was definitely interesting in the way that you guys added and subtracted.
It's so funny that you mentioned Grichuk because I mean every time I come on with you, there's some different Yankee killer that I wasn't even aware of, right? Because like from my perspective, you don't necessarily see it that way. I remember one year you raised Ryan Goins, and you were like so happy that Ryan Goins was gone, right? Because he came up in some big 2-out spots with guys on, I guess.
Grichuk murders the Yankees. It seems like every at bat he's hitting a home run. It's an extra base hit every single time with that guy.
Well, I mean, so you had said that like Yankees fans were like, sayonara, good riddance, don't let the door hit you. There's a lot of Blue Jays fans who feel the same way about Randall Grichuk leaving. He was kind of, there is an open spot for, fan base whipping boy now that Randall Grichuk is gone because, I guess outside of the Yankees, I mean, he was not an incredibly productive player for the Blue Jays last year. And he had signed an extension a few years ago as well that had become quite unpopular with the fan base here. But anyways, he's a Colorado Rocky now. It's funny, man, you mentioned the offseason. So an offseason prior to this past one, the Blue Jays won the offseason by a mile in signing Robbie Ray to a 1-year deal. Yeah. Robbie Ray, 1 year, $8 million.
Such a good
Cy
deal.
Young Award winner.
Yep. And
then Marcus Semien, 1 year, $18 million for a guy who finished third in MVP voting. I mean, that is like a 99th percentile offseason. The Blue Jays will never beat it. What an incredible offseason. They also traded for Steven Matz when he was at an absolute nadir of his career. He was coming off like a 9 ERA in 2020. They traded some just edge of the 40 man roster surplus for him to the Mets, and Steven Matz ended up giving them something like 150 innings at, you know, an above league average or below, I guess, league average, you know, ERA, and then parlayed that into a 4-year, $44 million deal with the St. Louis Cardinals. So, I mean, the Blue Jays had this, you know, magnificent offseason year prior. They're never going to top it, but the way they've replaced those players who have now left, as you said, they signed Kevin Gausman to replace Robbie Ray, Cy Young candidate from another league, going to come back to the AL East where he began his career and try to continue to have the results he's had with his splitter, which might be one of the best pitches in MLB. Pitching Ninja, you can look it up. I mean, this thing is unbelievable. They trade for Matt Chapman from the A's to replace Simeon. It's not a direct replacement. Chapman's going to play third. Simeon was playing second. But essentially, Chapman will take over at third for the next 2 seasons. And then the Blue Jays will slowly to platoon Cavan Biggio and Santiago Espinal at second base. And then for Matz, who was like a really underrated part of this rotation last season, Yusei Kikuchi gets signed. He gets brought in, and he's a guy who is like long had this really tantalizing upside and this incredible stuff, but hasn't really been able to put it together. And you actually look at his numbers over the second half of 2021. It was a weird season for him. He was an all-star over the first half, and then over the second half, probably the worst starter in the American League. Enormous hard contact, ball leaving the yard at crazy rates. His spin rates went down, his velocity went down, some very concerning stuff. But he throws a mid-90s fastball from the left side with some really wicked secondaries. So the Blue Jays are going to try to get him working with their pitching department, with guys like, you know, their pitching coach Pete Walker and Matt Bushman, who's their bullpen coach and title, but is really like their second in command pitching coach, and all the people behind the scenes. We're going to try to help Yusei Kikuchi make some of the similar adjustments that Steven Matz made coming off of 2020 when he was a similar guy. Threw mid-90s on the left side with a nasty changeup, just wasn't able to use it in the right parts of the zone to have success. So the Blue Jays are going to try to do that again, and they're going to try to get a bounce back from Matt Chapman, like they got a bounce back from Marcus Semien, who had a down 2020 in A's uniform, very similar there. And with a guy like Kevin Gausman, they're going to try to replace Robbie Ray, 1-2 pitch pitcher, with another 2-pitch pitcher. So there are some very interesting parallels here in how the Blue Jays have replaced those very significant departures, as you said.
You mentioned Kikuchi in the second half tail off. What are they IDing that? What are they saying about that second half? Was it fatigue? Was there injury? Was there just a loss of mechanics? What do they think that they can fix there to see a better second half from him?
So part of it, I think, is fatigue. Like, I do think he's a guy who should have his innings managed a bit more carefully, a bit more mindfully, and that's something the Blue Jays are going to do with Kikuchi and with Hyunjin Ryu as well, who had similar struggles over the second half of 2021. I think those are two guys who are going to be on a bit different schedules than just the every 5 days taking the ball sort of starter. But I think it's also a lot of pitch usage as well. I mean, Kikuchi's got this great, 95 mile an hour fastball, and he's got a bunch of stuff that moves in different directions off of it. He's got a breaking ball that's kind of slurvy. He's got a split change. He's got a cutter that'll run in on righties. And I think the Blue Jays just want him using those pitches to different areas of the zone. They want him attacking righties in on the hands with the cutter. They want him using that split change to, get away from righties and lefties as well. Like, so I do think it's just using, tweaking his pitch mix a little bit, maybe upping the usage of the split change a bit, which has been really successful, and he hasn't deployed that often, but also remembering not to get rid of the breaking ball as well, which has been a really useful pitch when he's able to locate it. He's just putting it in some really, really poor spots over the back half of 2021, and that's why he gave up some of the really hard contact that he did. So the Blue Jays will make bets like this on guys like this. They made a bet on Robbie Ray, really, a guy who wasn't in the zone for the first 6, 7, 8 years of his career.
It was a damn good bet, but yeah.
It was, but I mean, the guy, was walking the entire world.
Yes, he was.
Right? Like, everybody, for how many years do we say, man, Robbie Ray has unbelievable stuff, but this guy cannot just
find the plate
in the zone.
Yeah.
And the Blue Jays helped him get to the point where he did find the plate and he was in the zone and used 2 pitches for the entire season, fastball slider, like pitched like a high leverage reliever for an entire season and won himself a Cy Young award. They made a similar bet on Mats, as I was saying earlier. And then they've also made bets that haven't worked out, right? There are guys like Shun Yamaguchi who came over from Japan. That they loved his splitter too. It didn't work out. Rafael Delis was a bullpen arm that like blew up into a million pieces for the Blue Jays. So the bets don't always work out. But yeah, Kikuchi is another one of these bets where the Blue Jays say our folks in our pitching department, not just Pete Walker and Matt Bushman, but all the nerds and analysts with their spreadsheets behind the scenes, they can help this guy realize his obvious potential. We're going to get to watch that process play out all year.
Interesting. So obviously you guys have this young nucleus of an offensive juggernaut. They ended the season hot in September and coming in, obviously didn't finish the way that they wanted to, I think, in the total standings. If you look at that, do you see, and I know the eternal optimism coming out and that feeling that you're talking about, but is there a sense of unfinished business? Did they feel like they just hit the gas a little late last year? I know there were some struggles earlier in the season. Yankees had a very similar thing happen to them early in the year. It was just the early year baseball was just bad. What's the sense there? Because they got to have a lot of confidence in the way that they ended the season.
Oh, hell yeah. The Blue Jays are real determined. I mean, they missed the postseason by a game last year. They had 3 different homes last year. They began the season in Dunedin playing in a minor league ballpark, moved to Buffalo for the middle 2 months playing in a minor league ballpark, and then finished like hot as hell at Rogers Center at the end. And to a man, every single person and a woman, I should say, every single person in the Toronto Blue Jays organization believes that if they played at Rogers Center for 81 games last year, they would have made the postseason. They could have won the American League East. Like, they think that, they could have done so much more if they didn't have to face the adversity that they did over the first 4 months. And it's still a sticking point. Like, I still talk to people in the organization today, like this is, I don't know, 6 months later or something, and there's still people who are sort of like mad at the sky over that because they missed the postseason by a game. You're going to say something. What do you got?
It sounds like Brian Cashman screaming at the clouds from 2017 recently about how they were the reason the Yankees weren't in the play or the World Series because they were cheated, and like everything, all the circumstances around them was the reason. We're just looking for this dude to look in the mirror. Different circumstances, I understand that, but what they're using is chip on shoulder, which is not a bad thing for a team.
They're still sore about it. It's incredible. Like, still, how often, I'm not bringing this stuff up. It comes up unprompted from them, sure, just in off-the-record conversations. They're still so mad about it. And look, like, you can point to a lot of other things. The Blue Jays bullpen was imploding regularly over the first 2.5 months of last season, and they didn't act with enough urgency to address it. They eventually went out and traded for Adam Simber and Trevor Richards, who really stabilized that group and got a lot of outs in sort of the like 6th, 7th, 8th innings where games were being blown. And they were able to come in and give the Blue Jays just a much higher standard of relief there and convert some more of the leads that the offense was providing into wins. It just came a tick too late, obviously, because if they had gone out and gotten an Adam Simber like 2-3 weeks earlier, the Blue Jays probably find that extra win that they needed. But yeah, I think a lot of it, and I don't know, Yankees fans probably aren't going to love this. Like, a lot of that confidence comes from, as you were saying, how the Blue Jays finished the season like the hottest team in baseball, the best team in baseball, playing so well to a point that in some of the tiebreaker scenarios where teams had to choose like team A, team B, team C before the final game of the season, I know you guys remember that the New York Yankees chose to play the Boston Red Sox over the Toronto Blue Jays in one of those scenarios. I think that says it all.
Oh, absolutely. I would have made that choice 1,000 times again, because at that moment, the last team I wanted to play was the Blue Jays because of that confidence, because of the way they're swinging the bat. And, those guys, we've mentioned this, and, it's funny because I talked yesterday to Trisha Whitaker with the Rays, and there's a similar sense of confidence with the young guys on that team as well. Like this AL East is going to be a dogfight. It is absolutely going to be a dogfight. Minus the Baltimore Orioles, it's going to be a dogfight. And Yeah, there's just the way that they swing the bat and the
so fun to
confidence that
watch.
they have. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It really is.
It's just so fun to watch. The personalities alone, dude. You guys adding Josh Donaldson. You want to just drop Josh Donaldson into the middle of this thing? Like
the biggest agitator in the league.
Yeah, right? Like a guy who just loves getting under everybody's skin, like in general, but also a guy who there's still a lot of acrimony over how his like Blue Jays tenure ended. A guy who like had some pretty ill feelings towards the organization when he was ultimately traded at the like the non-waiver trade deadline or the waiver trade deadline in 2018. To have him in Rogers Center. Josh Donaldson has always hit well at Rogers Center. He hit well at Rogers Center as an Oakland Athletic, obviously as Toronto Blue Jay winning an MVP. And he's going to love hitting at Rogers Center again as a New York Yankee. Like, I can't wait to watch these Blue Jays Yankees games this year.
Yeah, he's one of those guys where I think Yankees had an interesting offseason and it's different than what the Blue Jays did, but they definitely went a different route than all Yankees fans wanted them to go. Clearly, that's just everybody expects the Yankees to go and sign a big free agent when a big free agent is out there. It's just it's the non-realistic expectation of the Yankee fan. It's just what happens. And the way that they did this, I was happy in the way that they changed their roster, because what they did is they brought different faces in. And those faces do different things than other folks. So they're definitely a lot more balanced than they have been in the past. And a guy like Josh Donaldson, where, that he was clearly the reason they had to make that deal. They had to take on that salary for the Twins so that they could go and get Carlos Correa. But he's a guy that's, he's definitely polarizing. He's an agitator. When he's not playing, when he's not on your team, you cannot stand the guy. You can't stand him because he's good and he does get under your skin and he does those things. But he's also the type of guy, like, he's not a bad guy that I know of, anything like that. He's just a guy that's a pain in the ass when he's on somebody else and you hate looking at him. Now that he's on your team, as long as he can get along with the people around him in the clubhouse, which we'll see what happens, but that's a good guy to have on your side. He is. And if he's got some chip on the shoulder, whatever he's using as fuel against the Toronto Blue Jays, that's a great thing for the Yankees. So talk more about that. Like, what's that relationship with him, and how did it go bad at the end there, personally, with him and the way that he spoke?
Sure. Even just to cap off what you're saying, like, there's some real sandpaper in this division this year. You think, like, the Red Sox have to be motivated after they were underestimated last season and obviously rose beyond those expectations. Chris Sale is just always has the red ass, right? And there's some juice between the Blue Jays and Rays too down the stretch last season. There was a weird incident where Kevin Kiermaier slid into home plate, got tagged out on an outfield throw, and the Blue Jays catcher Alejandro Kirk had his information card on his wristband, popped out. Kiermaier took it back to the Rays dugout. He got plunked 2 days later. It was a whole so there's like some interesting juice in this division this year. When it comes to Donaldson, he had some like definitely private and a little bit public as well, disagreements with the Blue Jays training staff and how they were handling his repeated calf issues that he was having. And he didn't love the program that he was on. And he actually ended up re-aggravating his calf when he was when he was trying to come back from that issue, and it cost him the majority of his final season in the Blue Jays uniform. It was also sort of clear coming into that season that the Blue Jays were heading in a different direction. They were looking to overhaul their clubhouse. They were looking to get rid of some of the older, more crustier, stubborn personalities, as we're talking about with Josh Donaldson. They were trying to refresh things and hand over the clubhouse to the kids that you see now, like Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel Jr. They wanted them to build their own culture. So guys like Marcus Stroman and Jose Bautista were kind of being shown the door, and Josh Donaldson was very clearly next going into that season because the Blue Jays weren't going to be good, and Donaldson was going to be quite a commodity come the trade deadline. And then it just was a disaster with his repeated injuries, him not playing. The Blue Jays ended up trading him to Cleveland at the second trade deadline, like just snuck it past the goalie for a guy in Julian Merriweather who might now play a pretty interesting role in the Blue Jays bullpen. Yankees fans might remember Merriweather just dominating them in April in that early season series in the Bronx last year. He had 2 saves in that series. So there was, there were a lot of hard feelings when Josh Donaldson walked out the door of this franchise. He's softened on it a bit since he came back to Toronto with Minnesota last year and did the whole wave to the fans. He exchanged jerseys with Vlad. Like, he did a whole reunion tour there. I think he actually kind of appreciated being around the Toronto media again, because I don't know if he was getting quite as much attention in Minnesota as he was in Toronto. So I think he actually I think he's going to be really rejuvenated though by being back in this division, by being in New York. He's a perfect Yankees guy, man. Like, he's a perfect Yankees culture guy. There are guys like Josh Donaldson who is just like better on a winning team and in a winning culture and in a place where winning is expected, in a place where there's a lot of attention, where it's a pressure cooker. Like, I don't know that Minnesota was the best environment for him, particularly last year when they were pretty crap. I think New York's a great environment for a guy like Josh Donaldson, and I would not be surprised if you saw him have one of these sort of like late career resurgences that the Yankees often seem to get out of like a Carlos Beltran when he's 39, or I pick another guy like we've seen, like Brian McCann, like some of these guys who show up in pinstripes and have these amazing mid to late 30s seasons. I bet you Josh Donaldson in that environment is going to thrive and do really well if he stays healthy, right, which is always a massive if with him.
The calf injury, I assume that he thought that they had him on the wrong path, the wrong program to get back, where he could have gotten back sooner for a longer term. Was that really what he had a problem with? That he just didn't agree the way that they were rehabbing it, and ended up.
He's kind of old school, man, like at his core, right? So the Blue Jays at that time were actually like in this process of building out their high performance department and hiring a bunch of new trainers and doing things a lot differently than they had been done in the past. So I think that Josh kind of clashed a little bit with maybe some of the methodologies and some of the ideas and some of the progressions that were being brought in and implemented that were just a bit more contemporary than maybe what he was used to. So he and I've had talking to people who are close to it now, it's all water under the bridge and everybody's cool. And I actually, when the Jays went to Tampa and Donaldson was there, he was like, hugging the trainers, the nutritionists and all these people and saying hi and what's up and all that, and everything was cool. But I think that as Josh Donaldson was exiting during what was certainly a very frustrating season for him, I don't think there was any love lost at that time.
Well, do me a favor, when he's next time you see him, when he's up there, just ask him some pointed questions to resurface this aggravation, because he's the type of guy that that seems to thrive when people piss him off or when he's in a high pressure situation. So yeah,
he doesn't need any help getting there, man. He doesn't need any outside motivation there. That is a guy who is very, very internally motivated to piss everybody off on the field and to compete as a real bastard. That's who he is. And it's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, for sure. The rotation you guys have, obviously the one thing we didn't talk about from the offseason is you did extend Jose Barrios as well. Like, this is a guy now, going in with those 1-year contracts from last offseason and the way that they worked out, you have some longer term deals here where it seems like the core has some room. They're not all fighting on this 1-year deal with some big guys here. But who else are you seeing? Is there anybody else that we can expect to make an impact that we don't know about? From the minors, someone who's shining beyond the big names that we already know about?
So the rotation is pretty well set, as you mentioned. Jose Barrios is going to start opening day. Kevin Gausman will follow him. You guys probably know all about Alek Manoah by now, who is this young, emerging force really in the Blue Jays rotation. Like, showed up early last season. A lot of question marks. Nobody was too sure what to expect. He had like 17 minor league innings because he was drafted like right before the pandemic year, obviously in 2020, and then was at the alt site for 2021, made 3 starts in Buffalo, into the majors, debuted at Yankee Stadium and shoved, and actually like went on to have this like brilliant year. Got Rookie of the Year votes, was just a mid-rotation starter at the big league level suddenly. So he's a guy to watch. absolutely he's going to continue trying to build in his sophomore year. Obviously, Hyunjin Ryu and Yusei Kikuchi rounding things out. Beyond them, Ross Stripling will probably see some starts for this club. Classic sort of Brad Peacock style, like swingman. Obviously, a lot of years with the Dodgers. He's a really useful piece for this team, particularly early in the season when they're, the Blue Jays open up playing 30 games in the first 31 days of the year.
Yeah.
And obviously, starters aren't going to be quite built up after this condensed spring training. So a guy like Ross Stripling either throwing bulk out of the bullpen or either making starts here and there is going to be really useful. And then Nate Pearson as well is another guy who has been a darling of top prospect lists for a very long time. Explosive fastball, high 90s to 100 as a starter. Wipeout slider. He'll drop the curveball in for a strike. He's got a changeup as well. He's got all the tools. He just hasn't been able to realize them because he has dealt with a number of injuries at a young point in his career. He's 25 now. This is going to be a really big season for him, and he's going to get big league opportunities. And if he's healthy, the stuff is electric. The stuff is elite.
I remember you talking about him. I mean, I think you were highest on him coming up and just enamored with what you saw. And injuries certainly look like they have derailed him. And he's kind of taken is he going to start in AAA as a starter for them to get innings up? Or is he going to be, given the 30 games in 31 days, a guy that they'll factor in potentially at the back of the rotation?
I think the latter. I think he's going to start in the big league roster because I think there's going to be spot starts for him. I think there's going to be bulk relief outings for him. I think there's going to be like a sort of Louis Patino role for him on this club where, he's kind of a little bit of a swing man. He's not a guy who's going to throw 200 innings this year because he just doesn't have that base to build off of. But he is a guy who could throw 125 innings this year, and those could come, partially via spot starts, partially via relief appearances. Nate Pearson pitching out of relief in September last year was pretty special and pretty dominant, struck out a bunch of dudes. So that's always an option for him, and that's always a way the Blue Jays could utilize him. But they hope that long term he's going to be a front of the rotation starter, and he's going to reach his potential and develop into what everyone believes he could be with his 4-pitch mix and his physicality. He's 6'6", 260, he's a horse. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, he looks the part. He's just 2021, he was dealing with a sports hernia all year, and he tried to pitch through it, went on the IL, tried to pitch through it, went on the IL, got a cortisone shot to get him to the end of the season, and then ended up having surgery on it after the year. So it's such a big question mark with him. It's just health and durability and how he would look in a heavy innings, high volume role. But his kind of stuff is so special that you give him every opportunity you can, because if he can put it all together, it could be it could be a real weapon for the Blue Jays. So yeah, he's one name to watch. And then not on the pitching side, but on the position player side, Gabrielle Moreno, who is a young catcher out of Venezuela. He's you'll see him in the top 10 of everybody's list right now. I think Baseball America, MLB.com, wherever you look. He came out of nowhere last year, put himself on the map, had some. Just a great year offensively, working around injury as well, ended up breaking his thumb and missing a bunch of time in the middle of the season. So not the most impressive counting stats or bulk numbers, but you look at the exit velocities, you look at the plate appearances, the pitches he was laying off, the swing decisions, all those things. People will tell you if you ask, this is a big league bat today. And he's a catcher. It's the hardest position to transition to the big leagues at. So there is still work to be done there in terms of game calling and handling a pitching staff. He will start at AAA Buffalo, and that's where he'll be for the beginning of the season. But if he hits again this year like he did last season and he's healthy, I think he's a big leaguer before the All-Star break. As an occasional catcher, some DH at bats, he can play a little bit of third base because he's a converted shortstop. He is a special offensive player and somebody who it's going to be hard for the Blue Jays to keep off of their big league roster if he continues on the career progression that he's been on for the last couple of years.
You need to stop talking about all these young kids who are playing good baseball and coming up, and everybody's super high on. It seems like. For really just talking, I think everybody outside the Red Sox really is, there are just a bunch of young studs in this division that are coming up. Even with the Yankees,
Rays have a crazy system.
The Rays have a ridiculous.
The Orioles have a surprising system.
And you know damn well that there's going to be 3 guys that you've never heard of that do really well on the Rays too. That come out and are impact guys. And it just puts so much more pressure, I think, on the Yankees for this next year and a half for some of the guys. Volpe is a shortstop that's coming up, obviously a top-rated shortstop. It puts a lot of pressure on them to really develop these guys in the right way, because everybody else in the division is doing it, and they're doing it well. So there's certainly a lot of pressure in the next 5 years.
Oswaldo Cabrera, you got some guys.
We got some guys. Yeah. We got some guys. Not as many as, I mean, granted, there's still a lot of big contracts on this team, and they're going to be here for a while. And hopefully there's another big contract that they extend for 6-7 years. Who knows? But all right, man. Well, I'll tell you what. I appreciate this. This was a lot of fun, enlightening, and really good to hear about all of the things that you guys got going on. And it's going to be a fun season. So before we end, man, I got to hear some predictions. Where do you think this whole thing is going to land? Where's the dust going to settle at the end of the year with the AL East?
In terms of like who the standings, or
the
like
standings, and how
5?
far do you think the Blue Jays can go, assuming you think they're going to make the playoffs? Because you wouldn't be a company man if you didn't do that.
Okay, the Blue Jays are going to win the American League East. The Tampa Bay Rays and New York Yankees are going to tie for second, and the Boston Red Sox will finish fourth, and the Baltimore Orioles will finish fifth, is what I think. But I do think that for the next 3 to 5 years, I mean, we think about how good this division has always been, the next 3 to 5 years are going to be amazing. Like, it's going to be so fun, as you've been saying. Like, we're talking about all these young players who are coming up right now. We're talking about how good the Yankees already are. The Red Sox are going to continue to being good, I think. The Yankees and Red Sox obviously have pretty exceptional resources when it comes to money that you can spend and payrolls that you can run. The Blue Jays are inching towards that. Blue Jays are going to run a franchise high payroll, this like a historic payroll this year, around $175 million. And on top of that, they were talking about adding Freddie Freeman. Like, they were talking about going up to ownership and saying, hey, we've got an exceptional opportunity here to add a really special player if we can get a bit more investment. So there is room to grow beyond that 170, 175 to inch up towards $200 million. I don't think the Blue Jays are ever going to be a luxury tax team. I don't think they'll ever be top 5 MLB payroll, but I think they could be 6 or 7 pretty easily. Obviously, the Red Sox and Yankees are up there, so there's going to be a ton of talent in this division for years to come. Obviously, the Rays are always going to be the Rays. They're always going to find ways to be annoying to get the most out of what payroll that they have and to win division titles as they did the last 2 years. And then we can't sleep on the Orioles, who have this incredible system built and are looking to come out of this rebuild. It's hard to see right now. I think they should have signed Carlos Correa to like a 10-year deal and made him the centerpiece of them coming out of that rebuild. Obviously, they're not ready this year, but within 2-3 years, man, like this year, you'll start to see some of those young players being graduated from that system, like the Rutschmans and guys like that. So this division, man, for the next several years is just going to be really, really fun to watch. A lot of good clubs. And I think that every team in this division is happy about a more balanced schedule coming up next year, because it just means less games beaten up on one another and more opportunity to kind of to take advantage of some of those AL Central clubs.
How many wins do you think it will take to take the East this year? Do you think it's 100 or do you think it's under 100?
97, 98. Somewhere in there. The thing is, like, the AL East teams still play each other so much, right? That they.
Well, it came down to the Orioles record last year. It came down to who played the Orioles the best, and the Rays did. They went 18-1, I think, against the. So if whoever takes care of business, to me, because you're going to see probably dogfights, 500, close to 500 between Red Sox, Yankees, Blue Jays, and Tampa. I mean, that's kind of what you can expect.
Right. And the Blue Jays play the Rays a ton in September. Like, some of those rescheduled doubleheaders ended up getting plopped right into September. So the Blue Jays have this stretch. I forget what it is off the top of my head, but it's something in around like 9 games in 16 days against the Rays or something like that. So that's going to be a lot of fun in September. And yeah, I just think that every time the Blue Jays and Yankees play this year, it's already been the case the last couple of years where the games have been intense and the games have been sick. And Aroldis Chapman versus Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and Bo Bichette has been like appointment viewing, and I think that's only going to continue now going forward.
Hell yeah! All right, guys, go give Arden a follow on Twitter. He's at Arden Zwelling. He does a hell of a job for Sportsnet covering the Blue Jays. Yeah, man, let's get back on later in the year and see how this thing's going. Appreciate your time.
Hey, man, playoff preview. Book it. I think we're going to be doing it.